All right, the Jets, they kick off a Week 1 matchup against a division rival, and that would be the Buffalo Bills. The two teams face off at MetLife Stadium on Monday night, and normally we preview the home team, but sometimes it's good to get to know your enemy. This week, we're going to preview this AFC East matchup and learn a bit more about the Bills, and we're going to do it with the Bills beat reporter for Syracuse.com, who was kind enough to join me in studio, Matt Parrino. Matt, how's it going, man?
It is great. Thanks for having me in here.
I'm glad to have you in here. We got the enemy in here. I guess, are you the enemy? Should we call you the enemy? You're just a beat reporter. Should we call you the enemy?
I'm from the city of the enemy.
There we go. So you're from Buffalo,
Yep.
Born and raised, which is good for our first question, right? Because football fans, they've seen a lot of Bills Mafia. You know all about that. And Buffalo, they've had a lot of Super Bowl expectations the last couple of years. For those who haven't been to a game up at Orchard Park, don't know what the vibe is like, what is the vibe of Bills Mafia, and what is the expectations from this fan base heading into the season?
It's people. I told you before the show, I lived in Las Vegas for a couple of years. It was a hard decision to come back. Family played a big role in that. But part of the reason I did, because this is a city that cares about a lot of things, nothing more than the Buffalo Bills. It's the identity of the city. When you're in the dead of the off season, like the draft's over, like mini camp, you get that window of the summer, they're still clicking on stories. They're talking about the Bills on social media. I mean, Bills Mafia, it's a lifestyle. It's, for a long time, 17-year playoff drought, it was always next year's our year, right? Well, now every year's been their year. So it's raised the popularity of the fan base. Obviously, social media's helped. The tables, the items thrown onto the field, all those kinds of things. But it's just a team, a fan base that loves their team.
They love their team. How are they feeling heading into this season? Are the expectations high for this team going into the season?
They're very high. I think fans are a little bit guarded based on the way that the last couple of seasons have ended. I mean, you go 2 years ago in Kansas City, the 13-second debacle. I mean, people were booking their, Super Bowl tickets. Everybody thought that, the next week they were going to play the Cincinnati Bengals at home, win that game, and then go on to the Super Bowl. And everything changed in a matter of minutes, and that's what could happen when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes. You go to the next year, and it almost felt like a big step back. It was the same round, but you hosted a game, that same Bengals team, and they really had no answers for Joe Burrow. That defense, Josh Allen struggled in that game. So I think going into this season, it's one of those things where, sure, it's a better roster. It's deeper in a couple really important areas that we could talk about in a few minutes. You still got your franchise quarterback, in the prime of his career. They're a little bit more guarded. But I think we were talking about it, the AFC is so stacked with talent.
So stacked, yeah.
From a year to year, I think that there's going to be different contenders that kind of rise every year.
Yeah, and guarded optimism for fans. That's good sometimes. It's good for fans to have guarded optimism. I think when we talk about the Bills and we look at last year, there's no way we can talk about them without talking about Damar Hamlin, right? And, what we saw happen to him on the field. And there was such a outpouring of support from the Bills community. I'm a University of Pittsburgh alum, saw that from the Pitt community. How is he feeling going into the season? And I felt last year when people talked about the Bills, there was this sort of the fact that the Bills wanted to still win for him. Do you still feel that among the team, that they still want to win one for Damar?
That's a great question. That's always going to be there, right? Like what he went through and the bond that they have as a group, what they went through on the field, obviously, it's always going to be a part of it. But Stefon Diggs said something interesting this week even. He was asked about Damar, and he was like, I don't even really think about that anymore because we've had so many steps since then. He's been on the practice field. He's played in a couple preseason games. He's going to likely play, probably on special teams on Monday night, but be back on the field. So it's almost like, in a lot of ways, you start having all these milestones and moving past it and putting it in the past, that it's more so focused on football now and the team goal, and he gets to be a part of it. I think in those special moments when he's out there, when he makes a big play, when he did in the preseason, there's a little extra juice, there's a little extra energy. But I think that they're just focused on just the fact that he plays football and supporting him and lifting him up in that.
Yeah, the fact that he is back playing football obviously is huge for himself, the team, the community, and I know everybody's happy to see that. We got to talk about the Bills' offense, okay? Because I know there's been a lot of talk about that. Stefon Diggs, Josh Allen, what might or might not be going on there. Does the team have a secondary target in the passing game after Stefon Diggs and also in the run game? So the passing game for one thing, but the run game, what's the plan for Buffalo's run game this year, and who's their secondary target after Stefon Diggs?
That is a great question about the secondary target, because I think it could change week to week. To start off the season, Stephon Diggs will be the first one to tell you, buy your Gabriel Davis stock. I mean, he had kind of a underwhelming year last year when he was the true wide receiver too, but he still ended up finishing with 7 touchdowns, over 800 yards receiving. And I think if he's healthy, he can take that to the next level. And it just so happens to be a contract year when that sort of thing tends to happen. But Dalton Kincaid, the rookie tight end, to me, he is the missing piece to this offense, because when it thrived back in 2020, 2021, they had that slot option. It was Cole Beasley, a much different kind of player, but in essence, they're going to be asked to do the same thing. Win with their versatility as a route runner, get open in space, open up that middle part of the field, and then be able to stretch the field. I mean, if you go back and watch Dalton Kincaid's highlights from Utah, he can stretch the field, he can get down the middle, he can work the seam, but he's also really good with those choice routes, those option routes, where you put the linebacker or the safety in a bind, 10 yards down the field, get open, provide a quick target for Josh Allen. As for the running game,
yeah,
James Cook. Like everybody, I mean, he's one of the hottest fantasy topics going into this season.
Everybody's talking about him,
Everybody
right?
needs that up and coming running back. Year 2, he's going to be featured. I don't think it's a stretch to say that he's going to get like 65% of the workload. And then you got to throw in the passing game. Like, what makes James Cook potentially special is how he can really put pressure on a defense as a receiver. I saw a rep against Micah Hyde, Buffalo's all-pro safety, in training camp, where they were doing one-on-ones. And now Micah's getting a little older. He's not as fast as he once was, but he's competitive in these situations. James Cook put a double move on him and dusted him for like a 30-yard touchdown in one-on-ones. And not to throw Micah Hyde under the bus at all there, but it just showcased what the athleticism and the pass-catching ability. They think he could be a big part of the passing game as well.
Wow, so that's interesting there. I think he'd be a big part of the passing game. That should help the Bills' offense here. Now we got to talk about the Bills' defense, okay? Because how good do you think this Bills defense can be in 2023? And I think a lot of that also might have to do with Von Miller coming back from the ACL injury. What can we reasonably expect from Von Miller in terms of contributing to this Bills defense?
I think you'll get most of what you got from Von Miller last year. He's just that kind of athletic freak. He's like the most positive person you've ever met. I mean, being around him for 10 minutes, just talking in the locker room, it doesn't matter who you are. You just kind of get lifted up. And I think he does that for a lot of people on that defense. And that's why I'm really bullish on what this defense can be. They have 3 All-Pros in their secondary. Tre'Davious White, now more than a year removed from that ACL, so you figure he's going to be closer to the version that he was when he was an All-Pro years ago. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer not getting any younger, but that continuity, and especially with this Week 1 matchup against the Jets, Aaron Rodgers with all these new teammates, what they're great at on the back end is disguising their coverages, what they want to do. There's so many reps that Poyer and Hyde and White have played together over the years. The big question mark is CB2, Christian Benford, 6th-round draft pick last year out of Villanova. He beat out the first-rounder, Kaiir Elam, for the 2nd straight year. And at middle linebacker, Tremaine Edmonds is now in Chicago. They're going with 2nd-year Terrell Bernard, who was a complete shock when they drafted him out of Baylor last year. He won the job. There wasn't a lot of competition to that spot. I think the Bills saw him in that role, and he gets to play next to Matt Milano, who's one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Also,
yes,
Greg Rousseau. Don't overlook him. Jalen Phillips got a lot of the buzz in that draft class a couple years ago, and rightfully so. They were the teammates at Miami. I think Rousseau could be a 10-plus sack guy, and from all reports, he is taking that next step. And I think that first week matchup against maybe Mekhi Becton is going to be one to watch.
That's going to be one to watch there. All right, good. So, as the enemy, I'm not trying to call you the enemy, but the Bills being the enemy for Jets fans, since we talk a lot of Jets football here, I got to ask you, as the enemy, what do you make of this Jets team? And we talk about this Week 1 matchup. What would be the keys for the Bills to get a win and beat the Jets? I know Jets fans don't want to hear this, but what would be the keys for the Bills to beat the Jets and get a win Week 1 at MetLife Stadium?
Well, I think First and foremost, you start with the defense when you think about the Jets and that unbelievable cornerback duo, that defensive line that just comes at you in waves. And, I was talking to Mitch Morse this week, the center for the Bills, and he mentioned it's like a track meet when you play the Jets because, of course, you start with Quinnen Williams, and now they have Al Woods, and on the edge, these young edge rushers in Johnson and McDonald, who looked really good. I actually thought the Bills should look at him in the draft. So you've got to deal with all of that, the speed, the athleticism. But then on the offensive side now, you actually have like that commander-in-chief that has seen everything in this league and can kind of run that offense and utilize the skill set of a Garrett Wilson that could completely unlock this thing. They had the blueprint to stop the Bills last year defensively. Josh Allen has mentioned it. He was sloppy against this team. He made a couple bad mistakes, and they make you pay for it. Now, if the Jets can be a little bit more cohesive on offense, make a couple big plays, put some pressure on that Bills offense, to me, that's the path to success. Whichever team takes care of the ball more in this game because of the high level of defense on both sides, I think is going to have an advantage. And hey, maybe as much as they were defensive struggles last year, maybe we get a shootout in this one. Coming into this season, the Dalton Kincaid factor that I mentioned, it's a little bit of an unknown. What's this offense going to look like? How much 12 personnel, one running back, two tight ends do the Bills decide to run? When they drafted Kincaid, Brandon Beane said that is where they're moving towards. And they still have really great playmakers at wide receiver. So a lot of different options. And I think both of these teams are going to be lobbing, curveballs at each other all throughout all four quarters.
Well, that's going to be interesting because I think you're right. Most people might expect a defensive struggle in this one. Offensive, it could be offensive struggle, defensive high power. We could see there. That would be interesting. But we could get a shootout. We could get both offenses trying to test these defenses and see what they can do. Okay, Matt, you gave your keys. Prediction time. This is where you're in the hot seats. Prediction time. Take a breath. It's going to be okay. Prediction time. Bills versus Jets go down on Monday night. It's going to go down. Who wins this week? One matchup, and why?
I think there's just so much pressure on this New York Jets team. They were highlighted. Everybody got a ticket into their living room for the past 5 weeks on Hard Knocks, right? And I think the reason probably Robert Saleh didn't want that to go down is because teams get a chance to have an extra layer of scouting on what you're trying to do. And so I think the Bills come out here. Ken Dorsey has reportedly, and according to Stephon Diggs, been in the lab all offseason, reworking all of the plans for this offense. And I think, like I mentioned, Kincaid, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, some more physical backs that they're going to add to the field. And second year for Aaron Kromer, the offensive line coach, which I think is really important when you're trying to build continuity and these linemen to understand the scheme. I have a feeling that the Bills are going to counterpunch offensively. You're going to see them have a lot more sustained success in this game, as good as the Jets' defense is. And then I just think this could be a situation, week one, it takes a little time for the Jets' offense to gel. I got the Bills winning 27-20. Sorry.
27-20. He's got the Bills winning. I mean, what'd you expect the enemy to say? Enemy's going to say, no, I'm just joking. I'm not saying that. But listen, it's going to be a very interesting matchup. And I think one of the things you were leaning to and what you were talking about is continuity. The Bills do have that on defense, also a little bit on offense. And that might matter here in week one. So we will see. A little bit of know your enemy with Matt Parrino, the great Bills beat reporter for Syracuse.com. Matt, so glad you got to join me in studio. We got to do this again when the Bills and Jets play each other later in the season. We might have to do that one remote. We'll talk again. We'll do this again.
It was a great time.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Check out Matt's work and enjoy the week one matchup between the Jets and the Bills.